At 0500 hours local time, 6 Beaver drones launched from Kherson toward a Russian airbase north of Sevastopol, hosting several rare B-12 plans. A Russian Tor M2 battery, located 12 kilometers away, detected them immediately, its radar operator watching 6 contacts bloom on his screen. What he didn't know was that 6 drones against 16 missiles looked like terrible odds. But the Ukrainians weren't playing the odds. They were playing a completely different game. The first pair of Beavers climbed near the Dnipro, their electric motors pulling maximum current, creating an electromagnetic scream that lit up every radar for 20 kilometers. That was intentional. These 2 drones were the distraction, like a magician waving one hand dramatically while the other hand does the real trick. 30 seconds later, another pair launched near Berslav, staying low, their thermal cameras turning the dark world into a grayscale painting of heat and cold. The final pair waited, engines warm but still counting down on a timer set weeks ago by a mission planner who understood that air defense systems, like people, could only focus on so many problems at once. The Tor commander faced an impossible choice: 16 missiles, 6 targets. Doctrine said 2 missiles per target for a 90% probability of destruction. That meant he should be able to swat all these down with no problem. But the Ukrainians had other plans. The radar showed the drones spreading out, each pair taking a different vector. The northern pair climbed to 500 meters, aggressive, obvious, practically screaming "shoot me" in the electromagnetic language. The middle pair stayed at 100 meters, boring straight south like they didn't care about the Tor at all. The southern pair actually turned southwest, away from Crimea and away from any logical target. It made no tactical sense. But here's where things get interesting. The launcher spun north and elevated. 2 9M338 missiles erupted from their tubes. Inside each missile was a computer smaller than a smartphone, calculating intercept angles, measuring closure rates, and predicting where 2 drones traveling 150 kilometers an hour would be in 28 seconds. For the first 8 seconds, the missiles flew blind, following commands from the ground station. Up, up, level out, slight left. Then their seekers went active, X-band radar flooding the sky, searching for their prey. The northern Beavers had been waiting for this exact moment. The instant their radar warning receivers detected the shift from search to track mode, that jumped from 300 to 1,800 pulses per second, they dove. It wasn't a gentle descent. It was a sudden plunge toward the earth, trading altitude for survival. The missiles tried to follow, but they had been programmed for a higher altitude intercept. Suddenly, they were diving at 60 degrees, their control surfaces screaming in the airstream, pulling 30 gs to make a turn they were never designed for. At 20 meters altitude, low enough to reach street signs if there had been any, the Beavers leveled out. Up above, 2 very expensive missiles were having an existential crisis. Their seekers, designed to pick out aircraft against the empty sky, were now staring at ground clutter. Every fence post, every metal roof, every puddle of water reflected radar energy. The Doppler filters tried to sort the moving from the stationary, but at Mach 2.5, the missiles were moving too fast to process the returns. It was like trying to read a book while sprinting through a library. 12 seconds after going active, both missiles gave up. Their computers, deciding no valid target existed, triggered self-destruct. With their miss, the Tor crew switched their attention to the southern pair. There was just one problem: the southern pair had disappeared. Not literally, drones don't just vanish, but to the Tor's radar, they might as well have teleported. The southern pair had done something boringly brilliant: they had found a gap. The Tor's radar sat on a slight rise, giving it excellent coverage to the north, south, and east. But to the southwest, a gentle valley created a radar shadow starting at 3 kilometers from the battery. This works because every radar has blind spots, places where terrain, the Earth's curvature, or just the physics of electromagnetic waves create shadows. The drone operators, having studied satellite photos and elevation maps for weeks, had found this gap. It was only 400 meters wide at ground level, narrowing as you climbed. Above 50 meters, the Tor could see everything. Below 30 meters, trees and buildings created their own problems. But between 30 and 50 meters, for exactly 400 meters of lateral space, the Tor was blind. The southern pair threaded this needle at 35 meters altitude, their operators flying by GPS coordinates memorized like a prayer. One miscalculation, one wind gust pushing them 200 meters left or right, and they would pop up on the tour screen like neon signs. But Ukrainian drone operators had been threading needles for 3 years now. This was just another day at the office. If your office involved flying explosives through invisible gaps in air defense networks. The middle pair, meanwhile, had problems of their own. With the commander focused on the vanished southern pair, the assistant operator took initiative. 2 more missiles left the tubes. These were programmed for low-altitude intercept from the start, no climbing to high altitude first. These weapons went straight for the throat, accelerating horizontally like cruise missiles. The middle pair of beavers detected the launch and did something that wasn't in any manual, Russian or Ukrainian. They turned toward the Tor, directly at it, maximum throttle. Diving to gain speed, they aimed themselves at the launcher like guided missiles of their own. This wasn't courage, it was math. The TOR M2, for all its sophistication, had been designed in the 2000s to fight 1990s threats, cruise missiles, attack helicopters, fighter bombers. Nobody in the Russian Design Bureau had imagined defending against 6 consumer drones. They especially hadn't imagined those drones would fly straight at the launcher. Every air defense system has a minimum engagement range, the closest distance at which it can successfully engage a target. For the Tor, that was 1 kilometer. Any closer and the missiles couldn't arm their warheads in time. Safety protocols designed to prevent the missile from detonating too close to the launcher wouldn't allow it. It was like a boxer with long arms fighting someone who insisted on hugging. All that reach becomes useless when your opponent is inside your guard. The middle pair of beavers would reach that 1 kilometer bubble in 36 seconds. The missiles, already in flight, had been programmed to intercept at 3 kilometers. Now their computers were frantically recalculating, trying to figure out how to hit targets that were accelerating toward the launcher instead of away from it. The missiles tried to reverse course, pulling so many Gs their airframes groaned. One missile's control surface actually separated, sending the weapon tumbling through the night sky like a 100-kilogram lawn dart. The second missile managed to turn, but ran into a different problem. It was now chasing targets flying toward its launch point. If it continued, it would fly directly over its own battery. The safety protocols kicked in again. No Russian missile was allowed to endanger its own launcher. The weapon self-destructed 800 meters from the Tor, close enough that the crew felt the blast wave. The beavers flew on, their simple electric motors humming through the night. They had beaten one of Russia's most sophisticated air defense systems, not through stealth, jamming, or exotic technology, but through math and physics, the kind of tactical creativity that comes from having fewer resources than your enemy. The only problem was, Russia has a metric crap ton of resources, as the drones would soon find out for themselves firsthand. The 6 beavers crossed into occupied southern Ukraine at 5:17 hours, and immediately everything got harder. The Buk M3 at Novokakhovka had been watching them for 6 minutes, tracking their heat signatures through its 9S-36 radar while they were still dealing with the Tor. This wasn't some mobile unit caught off guard. This was a prepared position with a commander who had been fighting drones for 3 years and had the receipts to prove it. The Buk launched without warning. No search radar sweep, no target acquisition phase, just straight missiles in the air. But something was different about these launches. The missiles didn't arc up into their typical ballistic trajectory. They went flat, horizontal, screaming straight at the drones at treetop height. The Buk was using its party trick, track via missile, where the missile itself became a forward radar relay, extending the battery's vision by 40 kilometers beyond what ground-based systems could see. Think about that for a second. The missile was flying toward you at Mach 3, and while doing that, it was also painting you with radar and telling the ground station exactly where you were. It was Hunter and Spotter combined, a 700-kilogram flying radar station that ended its mission by exploding in your face. The Ukrainian operators watching through their video feeds had exactly 18 seconds to figure out a solution, or their drones would become very small pieces of very expensive carbon fiber. The lead Beavers operator spotted salvation in the form of a grain elevator. One of those massive concrete towers that dot the Ukrainian landscape like industrial mountains. The drone dove hard, trading altitude for speed, aiming for the narrow gap between the elevator and its loading facility. The missile tried to follow, its seeker head locked on, transmitting position updates every tenth of a second back to the Buk battery. But missiles designed to destroy fighter jets weren't built for urban obstacle courses. The missile exploded into the terrain below, sending a smoke cloud into the air. Through the smoke, 5 beavers emerged. One had been caught by debris. A chunk of steel the size of a refrigerator had clipped its wings, sending it cartwheeling into a field where it exploded in a disappointingly small fireball. But the drones would not let the Russians have even this small victory. The Buk commander watched his screen with the expression of someone who had just been cheated at cards but couldn't prove it. His system could track 36 targets simultaneously, engage 6, and had a reaction time measured in milliseconds. But the beavers weren't playing by the rules he had learned at air defense school. Here's where things get interesting. The 3 drones crossed paths, not just near each other, but actually crossing. Their radar returns merged into one blob before separating again. The Buk's computer, trying to maintain individual tracks, had to constantly recalculate. Is drone A now on the left or right? Did B go high or low? The processing lag was only 1.2 seconds per recalculation, but when you were tracking 5 targets that kept swapping positions, that meant 3.6 seconds of confusion every 7 seconds. It was like trying to follow a shell game where the shells move themselves. That's when they busted out something that shouldn't have worked since the Buk M3's electro-optical backup system was excellent. However, in the pre-dawn darkness at 5:20 hours, it couldn't really differentiate the drones from the morning haze. The thermal imaging mode could pick up the beavers' heat signatures, but only at an 8-kilometer range. By the time the drones appeared as faint white dots against the cold ground, they were already inside the minimum engagement envelope. The Buk went to a mission silence as they passed, not broken, not jammed, just acknowledging defeat with professional dignity. The commander radioed his report, 5 UAVs continuing south, unable to engage due to technical limitations. Technical limitations, as military speak for, they outsmarted us. But Russia planned on that. At 5:35 hours, the drones entered the S-400's world. And the S-400 didn't play games. This system had been designed to swat ballistic missiles out of space to reach out 400 kilometers and delete anything that flew. Its 92N60 gravestone radar could track a golf ball at 200 kilometers, and its 48N6DM missiles could pull 20 GS while traveling at Mach 14. Fighting drones with an S-400 was like hunting mosquitoes with a sniper rifle, over the top, but still deadly if it connected. The S-400 at Sevastopol had a problem, though. A hilarious, embarrassing, classified problem that some programmer in 2007 had created and nobody had fixed, the system's velocity gate filter. The software that separated real targets from birds and weather had been hard-coded to ignore anything moving under 100 kilometers per hour. Not adjustable, not overridable, burned into the memory like a tattoo you got in college and can't afford to remove. 3 drones slowed to exactly 95 kilometers per hour. To the S-400's billion-dollar brain, they stopped existing. They became birds, anomalies, sensor ghosts not worth processing. The radar operator watched contacts flicker on and off his screen like a broken TV channel. They're one sweep, gone the next, back again but in the wrong place. But the thing is, S-400s never hunt alone. Because they are long-range assets, they also have short-range units like Panzers defending them. And now, Panzer systems were repositioning from Sevastopol toward Kacha, finally figuring out where the drones were headed. In 8 minutes, the airbase would be covered by point defense systems designed specifically to destroy drones. The race was on. Then, the Russian military's own aviation intervened. A military flight from Moscow to Sevastopol began its descent at exactly 5:41 hours. It was a completely routine personnel flight carrying 180 troops, approaching on the exact vector the beavers needed to take toward Kocha. The S-400 couldn't engage within 5 kilometers of a civilian or military transponder, another hard-coded safety to prevent the kinds of incidents that ended careers and started wars. The 3 beavers tucked in behind the aircraft's approach path like ducklings following their mother. Not close enough to be dangerous, but close enough that any missile engagement would trigger every safety protocol in the Russian air defense network. For 8 glorious minutes, they had a bulletproof shield made of liability lawyers and international incident prevention. The Russian air defense commander was screaming into his radio, demanding the flight be diverted. Air traffic control was screaming back that you couldn't just redirect aircraft without cause. The Russian pilots were wondering why everyone was screaming at them when they were just trying to land on schedule. By the time everyone stopped screaming and started thinking, the Beavers had cleared the S-400's engagement zone and were diving toward Katia at maximum speed. Behind them, the flight continued its approach and landed safely, completely unaware that they had played such a crucial role in getting the drones through Russia's air defense network. But during those 8 minutes, the Panzers had made the 2 kilometers north to Katia Air Base. The Panzer S-1 arrived at Katia at 0546 hours, its crew still trying to unfold the stabilizing jocks while the radar was already searching for targets. This wasn't how you were supposed to deploy an air defense system. The manual called for 5 minutes of setup time, leveling the vehicle, calibrating the radar, warming up the fire control systems. They had maybe 90 seconds before the Beavers arrived. Forget the jocks, the commander made the call. We'll shoot from the wheels. Shooting from the wheels meant 60% accuracy at best. The vehicle would rock with each cannon burst, the radar would lose fine track, and the missiles might not guide properly. But 60% of something was better than 100% of nothing, and nothing was what the B-12s had for defense besides the single Panzer that wasn't even supposed to be there. The radar painted 3 contacts approaching from the northeast at 180 km per hour, altitude 400 meters and descending. The Panzer had 12 5.7E6 missiles and 1,400 rounds of 30mm ammunition, more than enough to destroy 5 drones if everything worked perfectly. Nothing worked perfectly. The first missile launched and immediately veered left, its guidance system confused by the vehicle's unstabilized platform. It self-destructed after flying 800 meters in the wrong direction. The second missile tracked better, racing toward the lead Beaver and blasted it and the Beaver behind it out of the sky. Now inside the missile's minimum engagement envelope, the Panzer's twin 30mm cannons opened up, filling the dawn sky with tracers that looked like lethal birthday streamers. The guns were designed to create a wall of lead that aircraft couldn't fly through. But the Beavers weren't flying through. They were flying around, over, under, anywhere but straight. The operator was trying to track targets while his vehicle rocked from the cannon recoil. His targeting reticle bounced like a caffeinated squirrel. 2 minutes of continuous fire, 800 rounds expended, 0 hits. 10 seconds later, the first Beaver reached its terminal dive point. The operator back in Ukraine, watching through a thermal camera that had somehow survived 3 hours of flight through hell, centered his crosshairs on the B-12. The aircraft sat there, cold and defenseless, its distinctive gull wings making it look like a sleeping seabird that was about to have the worst wake-up call in history. The dive angle was 40 degrees, speed 210 kilometers an hour. By the time the impact occurred, the KZ-6 shaped charge warhead didn't just explode. It focused all its energy into a jet of molten copper traveling 8,000 meters per second. This jet punched through the B-12's aluminum skin like it wasn't even there, through the fuel tanks like they were made of paper, and into the maintenance cart of aviation fuel parked between the 2 aircraft that nobody had bothered to move. The explosion was thorough, to say the least. The second Beaver hit the Mi-8 helicopter 1.2 seconds later. This impact was less spectacular, but more complete. The sheeped charge hit the ammunition storage directly. For the next 30 seconds, 12.7mm rounds cooked off like the world's most angry popcorn, sending bullets in every direction. The Panzer, still trying to engage the third drone, took several hits to its radar array, effectively blinding it. The third Beaver circled once, its camera recording the destruction for posterity, then dove into the second B-12, where it soon became the latest telegram post of the Ukrainian GUR.